The sun took us to a deep valley, below the sea of clouds. The world looked small. We could take it and ate it all. Little ones came from the hills, green of skin and useful. They were too stringy to eat, so we put them to work.
Gnoblars are a distinct subspecies of alpine goblin that inhabits the mountains, hills, or in recent times the shanty towns of Ogre Kingdoms and the lowlands of Gnoblar country, which is to its southern borders. They are similar to their goblin cousins in many ways, such as their cowardice, evil-minded nature, cunning, and their familiar appearance and small stature. Just like their goblin cousins, they are also the slave force of the ogre race, mirroring the way that the goblins, the traditional goblin is the Untermensch of the orc in a traditional green-skinned society, acting as servants, cannon fodder, ammunition, or even food. However, ogres tend not to eat Gnoblars, for they think of them as too stringy, so perhaps they are morally superior to the orc, who is not bent by boundless hunger, but will often eat a goblin. Regardless, these highly unpleasant creatures are possessed of a malicious but limited cunning that entirely fails to make up for their lack of physical strength. Their gnarled bodies are topped with large bulbous heads, and they have scrawny arms that end in wide and dexterous hands. Despite their slender frames, Gnoblars have a disproportionate amount of strength in their legs and backs, having been selectively bred for load-bearing by their master's tendency to tread on those who fail to prove themselves useful. Although small in stature, most Gnoblars have a spiteful, ugly streak a mile long. Most Gnoblars are twisted little cowards whose animal cunning is bent on keeping them alive in a world where everything preys upon them and their own brethren view them as a threat to their position. Many go out of their way to lure animals and even other humanoids near the ogre camps where they can drag the injured away to kill slowly. When they do have something at their mercy, it's not very pleasant at all. Ogres sometimes torture prisoners to work up an appetite, but their great strength, hunger, or plain boredom can often end the torment early for their victims. Gnoblars, however, torture living things not only just for the fun of it, but of the sense of the power that it gives them, which is highly addictive to such a race as the Gnoblar. It's so rare for a Gnoblar to have an intelligent being at their mercy, something that they have outwitted or outcompeted in some way, for other Gnoblars don't count. For this is so rare, they drag out the process for as long as possible, often feeling betrayed by the poor victim when they finally expire and cheat them of their sport. Gnoblar whelps often gang together to torture small mammals like bristle hogs and rats, and occasionally even the smallest of their group if they think they can get away with it. The majority of Gnoblar sports are simply ritualized methods of chasing, tormenting, and torturing other creatures. The most remarkable feature of a Gnoblar is probably his nose, a massive, protuberant lump that can smell an approaching predator before it has a chance to pounce. This is complemented by an acute pair of ears, large triangular appendages that swivel independently at the slightest sound. A Gnoblar down on his luck will have them perked up expectantly, perhaps to make himself larger and more threatening. However, the Gnoblars found out a long time ago that the best way to make themselves look larger and more threatening is simply to stand between the legs of a well-fed ogre. Despite the fact that there is very little meat on a Gnoblar, they are preyed upon by all and sundry. They are often enslaved by Chaos Dwarf raiders, of whom they are deathly afraid, and not without good reason. The most important step in Gnoblar evolution, or at least this is the common theory among scholars, was the realization that the ogres dwelling in the mountains of Morn found them of more use as slaves than sustenance. Before long, a mass exodus of Gnoblars leaving their homelands in the foothills saw the ogre kingdoms infested, with shanty towns springing up in every available nook and cranny. Since that day, the Gnoblars have performed the menial tasks demanded of them by their ogre masters, and in return, the ogres ensure that only a comparatively small percentage of Gnoblars meet a grisly and unfortunate death. When a Gnoblar is claimed by an ogre, perhaps after offering a tankard of beer or a dead sibling to a prospective master at exactly the right time, that Gnoblar is then earmarked. This involves biting off a portion of the Gnoblar's ear so that the ogre's distinctive bite mark is left as a permanent sign of ownership, far quicker and simpler than branding. An earmarked Gnoblar is theoretically above the constant bickering and infighting that characterizes this species. The fortunate few dress in cast-off pieces of clothing taken from the corpses of the ogre's victims, and even accompany their masters into the field of battle, either at their side or in bickering mobs that pelt their enemies with anything sharp that they can lay their light-fingered hands on. There is an old ogre expression,
"I wouldn't trust a Gnoblar save as far as I could throw him,"
which has its roots in the traditional ogre practice of hurling a potential Gnoblar servant to check his worth. Varying quite dramatically in size, the larger Gnoblars tend to be independent, even rebellious at times, and they cannot be thrown nearly as far should the ogre wish to participate in a Gnoblar hurling contest, which is a blossoming sport in the ogre kingdoms. Small Gnoblars, in fact, are prized not only because they tend to be more subservient, but having adapted to this role of the Untermensch most proficiently, but also because they can be strapped to a stout branch and passed over the shoulder, scratching those hard-to-reach places with sharp, scrabbling claws. It is common for an ogre to develop a twisted affection for his prized Gnoblar servant, boasting to his tribe mates that his Gnoblar is a good little runner with a healthy green hide and a particularly droopy nose. Unfortunately, the more often a pet Gnoblar is around his master, the higher the chance he will be eaten or simply crushed in an accident. Almost every ogre has a Gnoblar to call his own, and they often echo the characteristics of their master in a strange Stockholm Syndrome-inspired mimicry. A Gnoblar belonging to a tyrant will likely be a bullying little tyke with an ill-fitting helmet, whereas one belonging to a lead-belcher might have a soot-blackened face and a rag in each earhole. It is possible to tell a lot about an ogre by the Gnoblars he keeps. Gnoblar society and status is a complex, many-layered thing that changes constantly. There are two measures of a Gnoblar's status: physical appearance and his place within society. As with their masters, the larger Gnoblars tend to rise to the top of the heap. Overall size, however, is seen as secondary to ear and to a lesser extent nose size. Just as in some societies a long beard or old age is seen to signify wisdom, in Gnoblar society large floppy ears and a huge nose are seen to signify authority and importance. A Gnoblar with large ears and nose is superior in his own mind to those around him, and will naturally try to take charge at every opportunity. This can lead to endless bickering, as most Gnoblars have an overinflated view of their size and the size of their own ears. The biggest, meanest Gnoblars are not always those with the largest ears and noses, but however large and tough a Gnoblar is, he will always feel inadequate and lacking in authority if his ears aren't particularly big. Some even go mad with paranoia, thinking everyone is snickering about their small ears behind their back, which of course they are. Ear and nose size is also the subject of great competition between all Gnoblars, with even the lowliest scum carefully memorizing the relative sizes of everyone in their neighbourhood, and having nothing but contempt for those who compare unfavourably with him. As with everything else, Gnoblars try to cheat with ear and nose size, and no end of dubious schemes are hatched to stretch, grow, or even fake them. This usually results in injury and ridicule, but occasionally something works and the lucky Gnoblar shoots up the social ladder. Some may even be bold or stupid enough to beg their tribe's butcher for help. This is unwise, as though the butchers often stick to their word and find ways of making the nose and ears swell. The Gnoblar concerned is very lucky if they live to regret it. House baiting. The grand Gnoblar tradition of house baiting was supposed to have been started by OGRE Kingdoms, who, after being beaten senseless by 3 of the biggest Gnoblars in his shantytown, managed to trick his oppressors into thinking that the tyrant would let Gnoblars, as distinguished as they, put their hovels up next to his yurt. Not wasting any time, Ogres ratted on them as soon as they did this, and the tyrant is said to have thrown the squashed remains of the offending tents and Gnoblars over 100 feet, clean out of the camp. Later that day, as the story goes, Ogres was captured and literally eaten alive by his cousins, who thought his warm brain would bestow great cunning on all who ate it. Even to this day, scrap merchants try to sell shriveled up bits of badger or weasel brain as the remains of the great clean finger. Runtsprint. One of the more cruel Gnoblar sports is Runtsprint. It was originated by ogres when Gnoblars first joined their camps, and is now a firm favourite with Gnoblars and ogres alike. Runtsprint is usually a game where someone runs around a specific track, and sometimes even within the moor pit itself. The only real requirements for a Runtsprint track are that there are plenty of spectators there to watch at once without having to move around, and that there are lots of dangerous obstacles. Originally, the ogres would round up the injured or weak Gnoblars and throw them on the track. All but the winner will be eaten, so with nothing to lose, the unfortunates are forced to run over dangerous obstacles as fast as they can. These days, the Gnoblars hunt their own injured down for the games. Gnoblar Bowl. Gnoblar Bowl is a regular event on feast days, and its place in both ogre and Gnoblar culture is a testament to the relationship between the two races. Its roots lie in a traditional ogre children's game called runt baiting. Young ogres who are being bored sometimes amuse themselves by throwing bits of worn-out clothes and worthless coins in the middle of a pack of slaves of lesser species. This works particularly well with Gnoblars, and a violent brawl quickly ensues as they all pile on by trying to bite and kick their way to the treasures and carry off the best. No adult ogre ever really grows out of enjoying runt baiting, and this innocent childhood game has grown into a very popular sport. Gnoblar Bowl is normally held on feast days and requires some kind of pit or arena. Somewhere between 10 and 40 Gnoblar volunteers wait eagerly at the edges of the gaming ground, while the ogres arrive full and content from the feast and relax themselves with a drink around the arena. When the go-ahead is given, usually by a tyrant, a bruiser, or one of the Iron Guts, some shiny and vaguely valuable items are thrown into the arena, and the Gnoblars leap in after them. Any item a Gnoblar can drag or carry to the edge of the arena, they get to keep, including bits of injured opponents. Betting on who will come away with what, and who will even survive, is popular, and most bulls will be bellowing drunkenly at someone they've bet on or against. Threats such as,
"Get the broken helmet, you short-nosed piece of fang weasel dung,"
or
"Smash your parts to jelly if you don't get the ripskirt out the helmet,"
or even,
Richka, drop dead now or I'll squash you myself. I have money on you dead.
Are all common calls. The obscene chants or songs are popular. However, it is considered bad sportsmanship for an ogre to physically intervene. Throwing bits of food or even Gnoblars into the arena is usually tolerated, but sometimes a particularly drunk or angry bull will stagger into the arena and discipline a Gnoblar that has cost them money. This is fairly rare though, because as well as committing a social blunder, an ogre that interferes in a game of Gnoblar Bowl is likely to upset the bets of other ogres, and ogres are notoriously direct at expressing their displeasure, as you can imagine. Gnoblar Bowl is also highly popular with Gnoblars. A large percentage of the population will beg, steal or even work to get permission to watch. Its popularity is even starting to eclipse more traditional sports like nose ribbing. Pig jousting is one of the most extreme, bizarre and chaotic games. Pig jousting, a common and confusing sight in most camps. Groups of shrilly screaming Gnoblars charge around on squealing pigs, tussling with each other as they pass, and often continuing to run around screaming after they are unseated. However, among the more organised Gnoblar tribes, a more advanced version has emerged, which ogres sometimes watch. In this variation, which undoubtedly gave pig jousting its name, two Gnoblars face each other across a cleared pit, sat atop their pigs, dressed in much protection as they muster, and armed with long pointy sticks. When the order to charge is given, they both charge forward and try to unseat their opponents. These imitations of human knights rapidly descend into chaos as the pigs run around wildly. The Gnoblars lose their poles. Impatient knights charge in to join battle early, and angry ogres start throwing anything that comes to hand at the useless competitors.
Now, brothers, for the blood god!